Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nadia Alhan. I'm an author and educator, and I'm joined here by fellow author and educator, Dr. Yvonne Brown. So today we are going to be talking about Caribbean immigrant and migrant worker experiences, and that is evident through my most recent book called Malaika Carnival Queen. Malaika Carnival Queen is my newest book, but it's also the fourth in a series called the Malaika series. The Caribbean immigrant experience is pretty much throughout the whole series. And then most recently, I touch on the migrant worker experience in Malaika Carnival Queen. This new book is dedicated to my two grandfathers who were both migrant farm workers. And because of that connection, because of the sensitive topic, especially around the migrant worker experience here in Canada and North America, I thought it would be a great idea to invite a very important and special guest to start the conversation, or to help us have this conversation, because there's certainly things about this experience that I myself do not know, and I seek to learn, and I hope you will too. Will learn with me as we have these conversations about the migrant worker experience. I would like to introduce our guest today, and her name is Dr. Yvonne Brown. And Dr. Yvonne Brown, we first met a few years ago. And Yvonne Shorter Brown is an Afro-Jamaican settler on Turtle Island. She is a distinguished educator with some 50 years experience in various roles. Her research and writing focuses on the social, political, and economic legacies of the transatlantic slave trade, plantation chattel slavery, and post-emancipation in the Americas. She is currently working on a political biography of Charles Archibald Reed, her maternal grandfather, and a former member of the Legislative Assembly of Jamaica. Welcome, Yvonne, to our talk today, and thank you so much for making the time to be here with us and helping us to digest some of this stuff that we're about to talk about today. So thank you.
It is my pleasure to respond to your invitation. I'm always flattered when a young person invites me to be part of their world and to share in some of the large topics that you deal with. Of course, there is a difference in your generation and mine, right? We live at different times, and we also have different historical consciousness about our origin. And I think you and I are products of the immigration experience from a different point of view from my history, but nonetheless, it's a phenomenon of the plantation history from Jamaica. And I can talk more about that as we go through. And definitely. I would like to congratulate you, Nadia, for the themes that you take on in writing, and your courage to just step forward and not only write and publish, but perform. And one of the things you forgot to mention is that you're also a musician.
Thank you.
Which you use to enhance your storytelling with your children's audience. And I noticed that they're very, they like your story.
Thank you.
And later, I don't know if you want at this point for me to jump right in. No. You will read a couple of pages from your story, and
yes,
take it from there.
I will definitely do that. And thank you so much for saying all of that. I'm very humbled. I'm always very amazed at all the things you have accomplished as well. And certainly one of the other reasons why I asked Yvonne, why I asked you to be here is because of our shared Jamaican heritage. And Jamaica is definitely, even though I was born in Canada and even though I was raised here, spent most of my life here, Jamaica is definitely part of my imaginary and my creative process. And I believe that's something we share. I've read your dissertation, your doctoral dissertation, which was published into a book called Dead Ooman Pickney. And I was just amazed at how beautiful you interwove research into the creative project. And I hope that's the kind of thing I continue to do in my work. So I just wanted to also open with a little short reading from my book. So I'll just start here. It's called Malaika Carnival Queen, and I'm the author, Nadia Elhan. Pictures are by Irene Luxbacker. I dream of a man flying through the air, carrying a basket of fruit, apples and peaches, cherries and grapes, pears and plums, but he give me a mango. And when that happens, basically Malaika and her sister Adele are sent outside to play, and but Malaika figures something is up. So I'm gonna skip ahead to that. After dinner, Mummy say she have something to tell me about my dream. Was that my daddy? I ask. And I'm going to leave it at that because I want you to get this book. So that's a reading from Malaika Carnival Queen, and it's my 8th book, but it's also the 4th in the series about a character, young Afro-Caribbean girl named Malaika, and she's having some questions. She's having some dreams.
Okay, so Nadia, when I read the story, I was struck by some themes that are very Jamaican, one of which is your use of patois throughout. I really like that because the children who are born here probably hear their parents or Jamaicans or other Caribbean islands speak the language that they created during slavery. And that's a brilliant invention because, as we know, the Africans came from various ethnic groups who spoke different languages, and they were traumatized in their voyage as captives to Jamaica and Barbados and Grenada and St. Vincent, and thrown together immersed within an English or French-speaking milieu of the planter class. Mm-hmm. And under the whip, mm-hmm. which prodded them to work, they had to make sense of what, as we say in Jamaica, what Bakra say. And so I'm always delighted when we honor the language as your Dickle Louise taught you to do. The other thing that struck me is the importance of dreams. When I grew up, the women, you would wake up in the morning, and after they make breakfast and they eat and send off the kids to school, mm-hmm. among themselves they would ask, "What your dream last night?" And each one of them would tell the story of their dreams. Who they saw, who visited them, what the events were. And interpreting dreams was a really, really important part of the storytelling and the consciousness. And I suppose that was an African heritage of connection to those who have gone before, connecting to the ancestors. And people will ask when a loved one dies, after a period, they say, "Your dream seeing me last night? Did he come to visit you?" And there will be stories about, yes, him stand up right at the foot of my bed. And he tried to tell me something, you know, but I never did understand what him said. So, I mean, dream psychologists and psychiatrists can interpret the phenomenon in a scientific way. But as far as folk lives were concerned, dreams were important ways in which, as I mentioned before, they kept connection with their ancestors. But relating dreams was a community event. And they would foretell from the symbols in the dream. Actually, there was a book that circulated about dreams. And the fish signified something, the storm signified something. I don't remember those things now. And I haven't visited that world for a while. But the memory of how important dreams are and were stays with me, you know. And I have lost, like, as you know, I've lost many of loved ones, including my mother, and I've never seen her face. I don't know what she looks like, but I certainly dream my mother, you know, whether it's imagination or what. And it is, I think, as you have demonstrated, dreams are a fertile source of the imagination, right? You can pull from dreams what you will, as you have done very well in this book. And the connection between the mother and the child, where the child has this dream, no doubt it's a nightmare, because the child, although she doesn't know, perhaps, her daddy is missing. And like myself with my mother, I never cease to wonder what happened to her. Why do I not know her? So children imbibe in their own imagination questions of why. And the question that Malaika asked, was that my daddy? I can just hear the child's voice, you know. So dreams are an important phenomenon which you've captured very well in terms of the imagery of what fruits the daddy was carrying.
Thank you so much.
We know from your description that those fruits aren't Jamaican, right? The clue is when she says, "You give me a mango." That's a wonderful imagery and connection as a Jamaican reading it. Your mama is wandering away, but when she at night when you're under the stars, baby, keep on running and you won't get far. Stay at home, Christmas Day. Don't let your mother down. Don't be a Now, the other theme that stood out for me was the whole thing of loss, incredible losses. And I think that's one of the, these days, the business of trauma, historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, personal traumas, these are all part of the public conversations these days. And the African American psychologist and psychiatrist, have done a fair amount of work, especially Joy DeGruy. And they have come up with a term called post-traumatic slavery syndrome. And Joy DeGruy has done a fantastic job of linking the collective trauma of slavery and contemporary realities and psychological profile of men and women and children. And so, for teachers, this could be a wonderful jump off for discussing traumas. And with parents too, And that's just a glimpse at the loss. And some children never get told the story of the missing parent or the missing sibling. They never get told because some things are kept as this dark family secret. Now, I'm not implying any maliciousness. What I would say, I think some of the traumas are so great that it ties the tongue. It makes it, in order to go on with life, they don't forget, but they have to put it at the back of their brains. And like mothers who are raising children, busy raising children, any childhood traumas they have to put it aside so they can appear normal for their children and to let the children be children. So some things you just don't relate until they're adults. Besides the work of the African Americans, both men and women, in Jamaica we have a very important psychiatrist named Frederick Hickling. He died in 2018, I believe, or 2019. And from a selfish reason, I'm glad I met him before he died, because he was able to answer an important question for me with respect to my preparing my second edition for Dead Ooman Pickney. He was able to help me understand what became of my mother. And Freddie and his wife Hillary, my goodness, she has a double name. I think it's Robertson Hickling. And she has worked with him as well and does some publishing together. And for me, his most impressive book is the one called Psycho. I'll tell you for a moment. It's in my vocabulary, 2007, Psychohistoriography. Psychohistoriography, if you put the two together, you see where he's going. A post-colonial psychoanalytic and psychotherapeutic model. And Freddie developed many things that are specific to Jamaica, psychiatry-wise. And at once he headed up Bellevue, the mental hospital, and he used psychodrama to help things. And he also had a radio program where people could phone in, and if JBC or the Jamaica JBC archive, you might be able to find some of the call-in programs. And there were really, no one else would entertain the heartache and the hardships that these I don't say post-emancipation, because many people in Jamaica are still not emancipated. Nearly 200 years after abolition of slavery, there are a good number of people who have never earned a decent wage. And we mustn't forget that, through no fault of their own, if we were to look back at the conditions of legal emancipation. So Freddie Hickling, he gave the term roast breadfruit. The term roast breadfruit, he had a fantastic sense of humor. You know, the US has Oreo cookie. It is the Jamaican equivalent of that, roast breadfruit.
Oh, okay.
Black
Roast bread.
on the
Okay, get it.
outside and white on the inside.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Okay, and now I get it. The roasted breadfruit. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, And
Mm.
so again, your revisit to look at Little Miss Lou, and she gifted to us in language. As I said before, I just admire your attempt to reclaim aspects of that or excavate the history for certain valuable aspects of the Jamaican heritage, especially the Afro-Jamaican heritage. And to cap it off, you have not just done this for selfish reasons. You've moved forward to publish children's stories for children who've grown up here. And in doing so, I noticed that you've used 3 languages. Was that deliberate?
That's a great question. Great question. First of all, language. I love languages. Since I was very young, I always wanted to learn as many as possible. And in my household, we were like, if me and my sister spoke Patois, my parents would say, okay, you don't speak that, in my house. We would hear them speak it. We picked it up. We picked it up from school. We picked it up from songs, and I studied French. I took French up to university. I studied some Italian, some Spanish, some Portuguese. So I often, when I'm seeing a word, I deconstruct it. I pull it apart. I get it. I guess it's called etymology. And I just do that kind of automatically. So that's part of kind of what's going on in my brain. But when I share a story, like the Malaika stories, I guess I put myself in the position of this child telling the story in her voice, and she's going to have an accent, and she's going to have a different way of saying things. And in fact, I feel like her accent has changed from the first book to this recent one. And then also the people she encounters. She's living in Quebec City. That Quebec is known for its accent and its spin on the French language. So definitely, I wanted that to be part of it. It's part of my experience too, studying French as a Black woman in Canada whose native language isn't French. And so just having a chance to make sense of her world through language. And you brought up the dreams as well. We didn't, because again, we grew up here, so I knew dreams meant a lot, but I didn't quite have that, maybe kind of a storytelling culture around dreams in my home. But definitely if I had a dream, my mother wanted to hear about it, and it's not often she may have something to say about what that dream meant. The dream that I had became a basis or an inspiration for the dream that Malaika has too. So when you said that you also dreamt the face like of the person of your mother, and hadn't seen her but were able to dream her, that struck a chord in me, because that's exactly what happened to me, and I didn't know that other people did that too. So I definitely made that part of Malaika's story. She had never seen her biological father. She certainly didn't know much about him, but intuitively in her dreams she became aware of him and made the connections herself. So I just, all of those things, and I find that when I write, I tend to write immersively, so I want people to feel like they're in the story, inside the head of the characters too.
I thank you so much for that authenticity, because often we write and we get stilted and we start in our heads saying, well, you're not supposed to write it that way, they won't understand, or whatever. But part of reading and writing is to push oneself to go beyond the parochial, to understand beyond yourself. That's what I find most rewarding,
Yeah, And certainly, as you were speaking, I just remembered I wrote the first Malaika book while I was teaching at the Afrocentric Alternative School. So I was there in the first year, and I had a lot of students. Most of my students were first generation, second generation Black students of Caribbean background. We had students with African continental and African Canadian backgrounds too. But when I shared some of my writings, my poetry, my songs, even some of Miss Lou's work, the students, they loved it and they laughed and they were amused by it. They were like delighted by it, because here is the first time for most of them seeing their spoken language written on page, and that was an eye-opening experience. So I knew that element would definitely be part of the story without even planning it. It just was how the story came to be.
Miss Lou from Beyond, I'm sure, is very proud of you, especially when you said they laughed, because she gave Jamaicans, even far beyond the grave, reasons to laugh. And she was a very serious commentary on politics, in gender relations, in food insecurity. There's so many themes. And you know, when she was in her heyday, many Jamaicans thumbed their nose at her. And you know what? She gave it right back. She wrote a poem called Colonization in Reverse, which I think is a fantastic revenge in patois.
Yes.
And I think it's the people who are doing post-colonial work now, and especially Jamaicans, would find so much wisdom from that poem.
Mm-hmm.
And if I digress a minute to tell you something about that poem.
Mm-hmm.
Many years ago, I think back in 1999, when my eyes were open to the history that I am a part of and knew nothing about, really.
Mm.
And so I started my own independent study that involved not only reading and researching, but traveling to places of memory.
Mm.
And so one of the places I went to was at the Maritime Museum in Greenwich.
Halifax?
No, Greenwich in London.
Oh, okay.
And there were 20 galleries dedicated to trade and empire.
Wow.
There was one section on the breadfruit voyages. But what struck me is that when you enter the museum, quoted right on the big print, a few lines from Louise Bennett, Colonization in Reverse.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so can you imagine my coming from Jamaica, where when I grew up, if you were a Miss Lou fan at a certain class, you kind of hide that Miss Lou was your fan.
Mm-hmm.
But Miss Lou, I'm telling you, she left such an academic and narrative legacy that we will be forever grateful to her.
For sure, yes.
And many of our historical poems, no amount of stuff in the archive can replace that. Let me hasten to say that 20 galleries that I saw back in 99 has all been sanitized.
Oh no.
Yes.
Okay.
Because back up until 99, we weren't as woke, if I must use that very abused term. And so they were still celebrating empire and proud to show all the loot that they had.
Oh, okay.
See?
All right. Yes.
And also their narrative about their civilizing mission. That is, they cannot do that anymore, because in a way,
yes,
the descendants of that history, like you and me and many others, and Eric Williams before, the guy from Trinidad, went to their archives and started digging up the dirty secrets from the files that were kept and the ledgers that were kept that weren't meant for us because they tried to keep us uneducated.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate Miss Lou. Definitely, I'm indebted to her and her legacy and the door she opened, especially with the Jamaican and Caribbean language. The fact we hear it in reggae music and reggae songs to this day, and I could be in any corner of the world and have been in many corners of the world and heard reggae music.
Like I gotta be a slave to the system. Come on, our stool for sin of respect. Never gotta be a slave to the system. Make some noise now. Oh na 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 na. Oh na 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 na. Oh na 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 na. Now roll me, anything in the system, I owe me. Owe me. Throw me. And it is the night on me. Know me. Throw me.
And also, I mean, a quick little trivia. I actually rewrote parts of that poem when Kamala Harris won as vice president, because her dad is from Jamaica. Yes. So I call it American Dream in reverse. That's what.
Yes! What a joyful news, Miss Matty. Me feel me heart going burst. Is a Jamaican win this election. American Dream in reverse. By the 100, by the 1,000, them voting state and town. Of the million Jamaican in America, this one White House bound? What a woman! What ambition! Me hear say she a liar too. The first black district attorney and know if he cook good food. Yes, Donald Harris' daughter. Me try to remember her name. Yes, she have an Indian mother. Them educated all the same. She come to Jamaica with her sister. Yes, one grandma in Brownstown. The Harris have a bakery there. Remember them drop the food around? Yes, them fair-skinned St. Ann people. The father gone a top road school. Yes, you know them, Miss Matty. Me no say you no fool. Uno see how life is funny? Uno see the turnabout? Our parents is two immigrants and you see how she turn out? She turn vice president-elect. She intelligent, speak with class. Kamala is the daughter name. How me forget Miras? Yes, Biden will be the president. With Kamala, them win the vote. Mostly black women vote for them. And color people turn out. What a way people wait in line. Man and woman, old and young. Them break the voting record and turn history upside down. Them take the streets in COVID time. In mask, them celebrate. You about to lose your job, them call at the White House gate. What things are going in America? 4 years them see the worst. They fight for them democracy and win. American Dream in reverse.
That's what I call it. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I love, and again I connect it back to the Malaika series, is just I think having the seeing Miss Lou take our language and put it on page, then it became easier for me to imagine it on the page.
Yes.
And
That's
even
a good point.
the editor, the publisher of Groundwood Books, Sheila Berry, she has passed away, but she was the one who gave the green light for Malaika's costume.
Okay.
And I had presented the Little Miss Lou story to her as well, and she said, well, there definitely needs to be a book about Louise Bennett Coverley, and hopefully, you know, somewhere Sheila's aware that there is now a book about her. Yeah, but I was wondering, I was also wondering, you had mentioned about the theme of loss, and we had this conversation before about not only is it present in the story but I'm wondering if you could comment about the theme of loss in relation to a lot of the Jamaican mental songs. We talked about some of the mental songs, those early songs had the theme of loss in it, and work, and leaving and departing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about that, and then how that connects also to the themes in my book. And even though I purposefully do not name Malaika's country of origin, I wanted the book to be very pan-Caribbean and universal. However, it has to come from something, in the sense I'm very inspired by my Jamaican heritage and my Jamaican background, and I have the Trinidadian Carnival inspiration as well. But I was just wondering again if you could comment a bit about that theme, that connection theme in the story, but also in music, and also maybe even in your work too, and how that connects us as a Jamaican experience of migration and immigration.
Okay, so migration, immigration from Jamaica came out of necessity, because most people will tell you when they get nostalgic for home, would say to you, me wouldn't get up and left me yard to come at this cold country. Okay, to speak in Louise Bennett's term.
Yes.
And usually, sometimes when you look on the expression on the face, you can see the pain of loss. And the airlines that fly into the Caribbean are the richer for it, because many people make an annual trek back to whichever island they come from. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to them, many of the themes are the same. I love my country. I love the food. I love the lavish, as using Louise's term. I love the palaver. And I love to go to church, because church on Sundays, where they dress up, as you know, with a nice hat and a nice suit, and they go and socialize. And that's where families and extended families and fictive family, by fictive family I mean those of us who have family like auntie this and auntie that, who are not related, uncle this and uncle that. And the expression, she's not my real mother, but she come in like my mother, like my real mother. Or they may say, him is not my real father, but he can come in like my real father. To me, that's a testament of community caring, where we all have a vested interest in the young person doing well. That's why when I saw you at that conference sitting there, I had to connect. And many of the young people will tell you that anywhere I meet them, I connect and try to hear from their world. And because I came here as an immigrant myself, naive and stupid even, and had to learn so many ways, the hard ways, I have a certain openness to talk with young people, especially those who are in the academy, meaning the university. Because I worked in a university for 31 years and discovered that children from so-called third world countries are at a grave disadvantage because they don't know the system, they don't know where to get privileges, the opportunities for publishing passes, they don't know how to navigate to grad school. But that's another conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
What I want to get on with is, I can't talk too much about the fruit picking and association. What I want to paint for you and my revisit to that history, and for our listeners, is the extent of the out-migration from the Caribbean, and in particular Jamaica.
Yes.
And in terms of loss, some have never returned.
Yes. That's
and
true.
their families have no idea what happened to them.
True.
And many of them were men, young men, who had to leave their families because there was no work. The structural poverty from the emancipation without any reparations just was enduring. And to fulfill their dreams of a family where they could be the breadwinner, where they could support their children, drove many to seek better opportunities. And historically, the 1890s onwards to now was an important period of time, because by 1890, sugar wasn't king anymore. So sugarcane, rum, molasses that used to earn for the government there.
Yeah.
There was a depression, big depression.
Right.
So, and all the imports were taxed unreasonably high for the poor people, and the mucky mucks were taxed at a lower level, if you can believe that. And I just want to, in preparation for our discussions, I began to look at what the numbers looked like and where they went. And I think I told you about remembering songs that people who had relatives, men abroad, that they would sing. One of them was 1, 2, 3, the Colon Man. The Colon Man.
Yes.
So Colon was a destination. The Colon Man a come with a big chain and licking belly, boop, boop. So of course that is describing the ostentatious return that some came, that they had money to show. Another song that demonstrated the loss and the grieving of a loved one, a husband, a father, was brown skin gal, stay home on my
baby.
If I'm gone abroad, he won't come back, right?
Yeah.
So
yes. And what's the next one? This long time girl, me never see you. And also every time my mind run blind lies, I water cover me eye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All these songs of longing.
Yes. So here are some figures. They're astounding. So between 1850 and 1855, 5,000 went to the Panama Railroad, the building of that railroad. Between 1880 and 1890, as many as 20,000 went to Costa Rica, the building of the Costa Rican Railroad and the Costa Rica banana industry. To this day, if you go to Costa Rica, you'll find descendants of Jamaicans.
Yeah. They speak English with a Jamaican accent. They speak Patois too.
Yes. Between 1885 and 1900, 89,000 went to the French building of the canal, the Panama Canal, because it was started with by the French, and then the Americans took it over.
Right.
Between 1885 and 1900, a large number settled in the island of Bocas del Toro off Panama. And between 1885 and 1900, a large number went to Central America, to Honduras, to Guatemala, to Costa Rica. Of course. Why? To establish
Bananas.
banana.
Yes.
Because the banana was after sugarcane, the banana became the biggest earning. When the United Fruit Company and Elders and Fife buy out the redundant plantations and started. When it wasn't profitable anymore, they pick up and left.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of, blue
Yes, go ahead.
fields. Blue fields in that area. I think it's in Nicaragua or Honduras, where you could speak, the people speak with a Jamaican accent. I also thinking of Marcus Garvey when he went to work as a supervisor at a number of these plantations in Central America. So
Yes. There's a connection.
Definitely.
You know, and out of that experience that Marcus Garvey had, it just strengthened his belief in advocacy for the laborers.
Right? Yes.
And because labor unions became an important part of efficacy among the working class. Then in 1906, 2,000 went to build the Ecuadorian Railroad. And the railroad to the sky, it was called, regarded as one of the greatest feats in railway history, and something which is only now being discovered. Many lost connections with Jamaica because of where Ecuador is sited. Then between 1885 and 1925, some 50,000 went to Cuba. No, in Barbados, there is a book I saw on the shelf that says, "Tell my mother I gone to Cuba."
Cuba. What year was that?
What year?
Yes.
Cuba, between 1885 and 1925.
Okay, so my great grandmother was in that group.
Wow.
Yeah, we have her.
Wow.
Yeah, we have her.
Do you ever know her history there?
Well, I would love to. I have her passport. We have her passport photo of what she took before she went. So that's, but I hope to find out more.
Definitely think that's a story you should write.
Yes.
Because many times the story of the men are told.
Yes.
And lamented and celebrated and so on.
Yes.
But the women, there were also women, because remember that the responsibility for the children legally was left to the women with the bastardy laws. And that's something I was amazed to discover.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, there's something called the bastardy law.
Interesting.
So you will see the phenomenon where there are many children born in the Caribbean who up to 1972, where there's no father registered with them. They're registered with their mother's surname, and the law permitted that if they were not married. And that astounded me, that there is a legal purpose for it. And the only time a child born out of wedlock carries the father's name, by law, it can only happen if the father goes to sign the registration. And of course, many men didn't care to do that, especially the married men, because they could have several women, impregnate them, and continue to appear as respectable citizens. So I throw that in there.
Okay, so that's another tangent, but
yes.
But this is interesting to me. This continued migration, from the Caribbean that basically began post-emancipation. So for those of you watching, the post-emancipation of slavery, I guess technically ended in the early 1830s in the British Caribbean.
1838.
Right. 1838. So after that, there was no reparations. There was no money given to the formerly enslaved. And those were the Black people. So they, interestingly, but at the same time, how history works, in the Caribbean, especially in Jamaica and other countries, the colonists basically imported labor, cheap labor from other sources, from China, India, Germany, other places where they were, and sometimes, and that's a whole other experience, but discussion. But if you look at even the characters in Malaika's costume, that's, they're Chinese and Indo-Caribbean people there. So that's their roots. But also this continued migration, the fact that Malaika's dad would have migrated, then her mom, and then it goes even further back.
Yes, that's the point. And the last figure I will read is between 1955 to 1900, 60,000 went to Britain. Does anything come to mind?
So this is around the Windrush generation, right? So
exactly.
You said 1955 to what was
to 1970.
The 1970s. Wow. So that's within a 15-year period. That's a huge number of people.
Yes.
And again, they went post World War II. Britain was trying to reconstruct its all of its infrastructure. There's huge shortages of tradespeople and nurses, and that's where a lot of the Caribbean people came in. Yeah.
Yes. So what I want to say, that is just to give you the magnitude of that emigration. And it continues to this day.
It does.
Right? Because most of the people that we're talking about with these figures were the poor Afro-Jamaicans who had no alternative. And many had very little education. So laboring was what they had to do. And any pay that was better than what they could earn from their former slave masters, they were going. Now, I can't, we are almost done. But so what I'd like to do is to recommend two books that would get into it. One, in terms of Canadian farm workers, Cecil Foster, who wrote the book, A Place Called Heaven, The Meaning of Being Black in Canada. That was published in the 90s and was every young Black person's Bible. He was at Guelph for many years, and he's written many novels. One was No Man in the House, about growing up in Barbados, and his father went abroad, and so did his mother, and he grew up with his grandmothers. And there is Austin Clarke, of late Austin Clarke, growing up stupid under the Union Jack. And he has a wonderful discussion, a picture of his aunt who went to one of these places, I can't remember if it's Cuba or the States, and who would send back money. That's what sent him to the best high school, so he could become the novelist that he became afterwards. But there was something, so Cecil writes imaginatively about the Canadian experience. Now there are a couple nonfiction books that I would like to refer to. And one is by a Barbadian academic named Velma Newton. No doubt she's from the Newton plantation, which was a big one.
Oh, wow.
She writes, her title is The Silver Men, West Indian labor migration to Panama between 1850 and 1914. And it is a wonderful academic treatise of how the people were used and all of that. Then there a parallel one done by Olive Sr.
Yes.
Called Dying to Better Themselves. That's on my TBR list, my to be read list. Yes. What is that?
That's on my TBR or my to be read list. It's been on there for a long time. Yes.
So continue your interest in that. It is Those are two must reads, I think. And
Mhm.
Cecil Foster's, the one that Cecil wrote pertaining to the fruit pickers in Canada is called Slamintar. Yes.
I mean, even though my grandfathers inspired the story and they were migrant farm workers in the States, and of course I live in Canada, and I did go visit the farms in Canada, and what I realized was that, well, I was like, wow, there's a community here. I don't think most people know about this at all. And my hope in this book is that people will now want to know more about the experiences of migrant workers. We certainly have, in the last couple years, have heard a little bit more about some of the challenges and some of the dangers of their work. My hope is that people will take an interest, and also the fact that Malaika, it's very realistic. It's not a distant history. It's actually many people to this day, Caribbean people and other communities, their parents sometimes have to leave the child when they're quite young. The child is in the care of a grandparent. I was just thinking about that experience, about the older generation helping to raise the younger generation while the parents are absent. Is there anything you can comment on that, maybe as your experience of as being a Jamaican immigrant to Canada, or even as a teacher?
Oh my goodness.
Or even your personal experience?
Oh yes, listen, the grandmothers are to be memorialized, because most of them turn around and do double duty.
Yes.
They raise their own children, and then they help to raise the others. And sometimes they're solely responsible. And I know that when I was growing up, it was sort of claimed that you could know who is raised by their grandmother. And because of the manner of dress and different things.
Yes, yeah.
And if one insult would be, especially if it's a boy child, you see him there, and granny raised him, you know. Which is to give the child a thing in their ego structure to say you're lesser than thing. But the other part I want to end with saying, you know, the phenomenon of the barrel children?
Yes, the barrel child. Malaika was a barrel child.
Okay. Now, some sociologists speak about it with scorn. But I want to say, and somebody wrote a play that was performed.
Oh gosh, it's called How Black Mothers Say I Love You. And it's by Trey Anthony.
That
Trey
was
Anthony.
Right on.
Yes.
Right
and then
on.
Yes, and then there was a short film, a British Barbadian film called, I think, Auntie. And it's also about the barrel child phenomenon.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it is so paradoxical, because if those mothers didn't go abroad, and Canada has its own story about the domestic workers,
right,
and all the drama around that and the sacrifices.
Yes.
And many children live this long life pain of feelings of abandonment.
Right.
That's where the paradox is. While at the same time, they could not have had the education and the lifestyle that they enjoy.
Yeah.
So we need somehow to do some kind of ceremonial things to mourn that loss, but to understand very deeply why that had to be so.
Yes.
You know? And yes.
Yeah, to unpack that. I think I as an author, has someone who's been writing, like Malaika's, that's all of Malaika's story.
Yes.
And I have looked for other resources, creative resources that unpack that. And there are a particular book by an author based here, and I think it's about a little girl coming to terms with why her mom had to leave. And then there are just some young adult novels by first, second generation Caribbean Americans, and I can't think of any Canadians, but I know Caribbean Americans who are talking about, where the child that comes back as a teenager to the US to join the mother, and what that's like, and I feel like there isn't enough space in a classroom, in a school, in the society to even come to terms. And I don't know, some people who has gone through that experience, when I ask about it, it's kind of that's, we just had to make do and move on. And I'm just like, what about that? Like, I'm thinking about that little child, because those years are, I have an undergrad in psychology. In those times, that early stage of development, you're forming your childhood awareness of the world around you. You're coming to terms with language, relationships, bonding, all of those kind of things. And to lose a primary caregiver for a number of years during that stage, I'm wondering, I've wondered about, which psychologists are studying that impact, and how does that impact those, does it have an impact on those kids later? Or are there some coping strategies that people have developed over time to come to terms with it and move on, as you say, right?
I don't know anything offhand, but in terms of my own practice, I listened to university kids from the Caribbean to their stories when I was teaching at university, and I recognized that pain, that primordial pain, and thought to myself, I don't want to make judgments, so I developed a pedagogical strategy called a pedagogy of pain and healing. And what I did, I invented a course called The Presence of African Black Women in the Americas from Slavery to the Present. And it's still being taught at UBC. It went all the way to the Senate and got approved.
Wow.
And that, to me, I made it very clear to my students who signed up. This course is very emotionally laden. You will experience emotions that catch you by surprise. And that is acceptable in my class. And you don't have to make any personal confessions. So I use fiction and autobiographies so that they can protect whatever, but they can have a vocabulary to speak through the fiction, where they can say, this book that I'm reading, this character said this, or gave insight.
Yeah, so the character acts almost as I'm trying to think, proxy. I'm trying to think of the word for works. The person, as almost like a decoy. I don't know if that's I'm trying to find the word.
But it is a cover.
Yes.
Right? But they learn.
Yes.
And there are times I had to bring a dramatist in to do theater exercises of trust and so on. And there are times when there are certain films like Sankofa, when I showed it.
Oh, I want to see that film so bad.
I thought it was a fantastic film. I bought it for $110. I have my own copy.
Okay.
And used it in the class because it's the best film drama about slavery. And then the first time I showed it cold, no. The next time I asked this first class, should I show this again? And they said, yes, Yvonne, you should, because we had no idea of the extent of that trauma and how long it went, and the capitalist economy and the maritime and mercantile thing around it. So when we talk like that and acknowledge the rage and the shame and all those things in the class, and give them the pedagogical matrix that makes it possible for them both to learn the history from which they come and to look at the contemporary legacy, and that whatever profession they choose, I would like them to have this knowledge at the back of their head so that they can understand fact from fiction, and that they will have some tools to make assertive, not aggressive, assertive criticism.
Yes.
And so on. So that's a subject for another conversation.
And you know what? As you're talking about that, I hope my books will be those tools for children in an age group of the Malaika series can be read by anybody, but it's from usually 3 to 8 years old, 4 to 8 years old. So I would love my readers to see Malaika as a extension of themselves, and to see how she navigates some of the challenges in her life, and hopefully they will know or find some ways in their own little way, in their own way, to come to terms with all these changes, and I hope that I can do that as writers, because sometimes I feel children just need those kinds of tools too, just like we do. We have self-help books as adults. Those kids, their self-help books are often picture books.
Yes, and look here, I am not asking. I think my goal was for you to come to know what the truth is, or several truths, and most of all, to develop some empathy.
Yes.
For the suffering around you, collective trauma that we all carry. And any day, I am thankful that out of my maternal deprivation has come an ability to observe, listen, and to discern.
Yeah. And
in my philosophy, I can't fix things materially for people, but I can help to ease the pain by a kind word, by suggesting information that might help them to understand. Many people are saying, bring closure. You never bring closure. And many people are saying, have you forgiven so-and-so? I didn't seek to forgive for anything, because forgiveness requires somebody understanding that a wrong was done, admitting that a wrong was done, and ask for that forgiveness. In the absence of that process, to me, it's not useful. But if you talk to me about coming to understand and coming to have some empathy for certain things, and even sympathy, then that's the best we can do. And like you, as a teacher, a storyteller, a writer, you're on the right path, girl. So I'd like to leave that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I look up to you as an educator, as an author, and like I said, if you ever seen on my timeline when I was reading your book, I was reading it. I was in Dubai. I was at a hotel by the pool, and I could not put your book down. I was surrounded by this, basically the scene you see behind you is what I had around me, but I was focused on the book, because it was just like so true, so real, so all of these things. And I did pass it along to my mom, and there are parts of it she still will mention and just she could relate to. There's that piece, that part of, and the thing is, we come from this place, and the humble beginnings and the rural experiences. I still see it in my parents to this day. They're basically, they grew up around it, and they planted their own food, and that's important. So to this day, Victoria Day weekend is time to plant,
Yes.
And they know, like, we can easily buy the food at a supermarket, but that's been them since, for so long. They're close to the land.
Yes.
And I wonder, as a Canadian teaching these Canadian children, I want as close. I know their roots aren't here, but I want them to feel that they have somewhere that they also belong to,
Yes.
and they can touch and know, and hopefully my books will give that to them. So I just, do you have any last thoughts before we close?
I guess I'll give a couple last thoughts. First of all, I have enjoyed our conversation because in an unstructured, we started off with a structure, but in an unstructured way, we covered many things.
I think, yes, we did. Yes.
And I would like to encourage you to continue to write and publish because you're filling a gap.
Thank you.
As an educator, and it would be interesting after some time for somebody in teaching to do a research on the effect that your books, your series have on the children.
Thank you.
That is my wish, because I think you're making quite a difference and a contribution as a teacher, a musician, a writer, and what should I say? Inquisitive and curious. And in Jamaica, they would say you're a fast Pickney.
Fast.
Fast. You ever hear that expression?
Yes, it's too fast. You're too fast.
That means you ask more questions than they can answer.
Yeah, I always have a lot of questions. Yes, it is.
It's a good
Thank
thing
you.
for a child and for a teacher to value.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you. I appreciate our conversation. There's so much more. I can't wait to pick up the revised version, the second edition of your book.
Yes.
I look forward to reading that, and I've learned so much from you, and I hope to continue this search. I take that Akan Shanti, the Dinka symbol, the Sankofa, when it's basically like a duck or a bird looking back to pick up the egg. Yeah. And a former coworker from Ghana said it's like you're going back to pick up the things that you're owed, that you should have. So I feel like, I hope my stories do that, and I'm so glad that Ashe affirmed that hopefully somebody will see the value in a picture book and want to see the impact, and certainly I wish you all the best with your dissertation, and I look forward to reading. We're actually hoping to do another talk where we discuss your books.
I would love that. I would love that.
Sorry. Yeah,
okay.
For sure. Okay. All right. Okay. And this recording, thank you, everybody. I will put a lot of links with this video, and this recording is going to be posted. So thank you again for joining us. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you.